Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. Nobody cares, not really. Not about your excuses, not about your pain, not about your story. And that's not a bad thing, it's liberating. Because the moment you realize the world isn't gonna hand you anything just because you're hurting, it's the moment you take your power back. You see, the weight you're carrying, those negative feelings, the doubt, the fear, the frustration, they are real. I'm not here to pretend they aren't, but they are not your identity, they're not your destiny, and they sure as hell aren't your ceiling. What you feel is valid, but it is not final. And in a world where everybody is waiting for someone else to give them permission, you've got to become the one who decides, I'm not waiting anymore. Nobody cares. Work harder. Not for validation, not for applause, but because you know what's inside you and you refuse to waste it. Now let's talk about how to overcome those feelings. Not by avoiding them, but by mastering them. You wake up in the morning and already something feels off. The weight in your chest, the tightness in your stomach, the fog over your thoughts. It's there before you've even had your coffee. And the first thing most people do, they assume it's the world. It's their boss, their bank account, their past, their situation. They start pointing fingers at everything outside themselves. But here's the truth that can shake your world in the best way possible. Your emotions are not created by your circumstances, they're created by your thoughts. What you feel is a direct response to how you're thinking about your reality, not the reality itself. And that's the doorway to freedom most people never open. You see, every single feeling you experience, whether it's joy, sadness, anger, or fear, is born from a thought. It's not automatic, it's not random, it's not the weather. Your mind is constantly interpreting everything that's happening around you. And based on that interpretation, it creates an emotional response. If you believe you're stuck, you'll feel trapped. If you believe you're growing, you'll feel hopeful. Even if nothing around you has changed. It's not the event that controls you, it's the meaning you assign to it. You weren't born with anxiety. You weren't born with low self-worth. You weren't born with guilt, shame, or hesitation. These were things you learned, things you accepted, often unconsciously. And the good news is what you learn, you can unlearn. But to do that, you've got to stop giving your emotions more power than your awareness. Most people don't suffer because of what's happening. They suffer because they believe they're powerless to change how they feel about it. Let's break this down. You get fired from a job. Two people can have the exact same experience, same role, same outcome. One spirals into depression, feeling worthless, hopeless, stuck. The other sees it as a turning point, a wake-up call, a doorway to a better life. Same situation, different emotions. What changed? The way they processed it, the narrative in their mind, the story they told themselves afterward. That's the part most people miss. The gap between what happens and how you feel is filled with interpretation, and you are the interpreter. That gives you more control than you realize. But control doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending they don't exist. That's not strength, that's denial. Control means understanding. It means becoming aware of the pattern. When you feel a wave of negativity hitting you, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's insecurity, your job is not to panic. Your job is to pause. Ask yourself, what thought just triggered this feeling? What belief am I clinging to right now that's feeding this emotion? You'll find that behind almost every negative feeling is a lie. A lie you accepted somewhere along the way. Maybe the lie is, I'm not enough, or I'll never figure it out, or it's too late for me. You weren't born thinking that way. You were conditioned to think that way. And if your conditioning got you here, reconditioning can take you somewhere new. It's not magic, it's mechanics. Thought creates emotion. Change the thought and the emotion has nowhere to land. It might not disappear instantly, but it loses its grip. It stops controlling your behavior. That's power. That's mastery. Now, some people hear this and say, but you don't understand. I've been through some real things. I didn't choose to feel this way. And you're right, you didn't choose the event. You didn't choose the trauma, the betrayal, the setback. But you always choose the meaning you carry forward. And that meaning becomes your lens, and that lens becomes your prison or your power, depending on whether you take responsibility for it. Responsibility doesn't mean blame. It doesn't mean saying what happened was okay. It means saying from this point forward, I choose how I respond. That shift from victim of your emotions to master of your mind is where real growth begins. Your mind is a garden. If you don't plant what you want, the weeds will take over by default. That's what negative emotions are. Overgrown weeds from unattended thoughts. If you don't consciously program your mind to think thoughts that support your vision, your mind will automatically replay everything from your past that supports your limitations. That's why repetition is so important. You can't think one empowering thought and expect it to erase years of self-doubt. You've got to saturate your mind with what you want it to believe. Every day, every hour, every moment, you catch yourself drifting back into fear, into old patterns. You pause, redirect, and reaffirm, I am not my feelings. I am the one who observes them. I am the one who chooses what to do next. And listen, it's not about never feeling low again. That's not the goal. The goal is to become the kind of person who can feel low and still choose to move forward, who can feel anger and still choose to act with integrity, who can feel doubt and still choose to take the next step. That's what real control looks like. It's not suppression, it's sovereignty. Most people are waiting to feel good before they do what they need to do. So that's the trap. If your emotions run your actions, you'll always be a slave to how you feel. The people who build real strength, real success, real fulfillment, they do the work regardless of the feeling. And ironically, that's what changes how they feel. You don't wait for clarity, you create it. You don't wait for motivation, you generate it. You don't wait for peace, you train your mind to return to it. Every emotion you feel can be traced back to a thought. And every thought can be redirected if you've trained your mind to see through the illusion. And that training begins the moment you decide to stop being the victim of your inner world and start becoming the architect of it. You are not your circumstances. That might sound like a bold statement, maybe even unrealistic if you're surrounded by struggle, disappointment, or setbacks. But the truth is deeper than your environment, your history, or your current pain. You are not where you are who you decide to become. Circumstances are temporary. Decisions are permanent. And when you understand the power of a decision, what it really means to decide, you begin to separate yourself from everything you thought was holding you back. A decision isn't a wish. It's not a hope. It's not a someday. A decision is a line in the sand. It is you saying, I am done living under the influence of everything I didn't choose. Most people wait for something to change before they change. They wait for the money to show up, the opportunity to fall in their lap, the pain to go away. They wait for perfect timing, but perfect timing is an illusion. Life doesn't hand out clean invitations to transformation. You decide in the middle of the mess that you're going to rise. That's when everything starts shifting. Right now, you might be surrounded by debt, failure, heartbreak, confusion, and your mind might say, this is who I am, this is just how it's going to be. But that's not the truth. That's just a program. That's a mental habit. And the moment you decide to interrupt that pattern, the moment you say, this is not the end of my story, you start to tap into your power. Decision is creation. When you decide who you are and what you will become, the universe starts to rearrange in your favor. But the rearrangement doesn't come before the decision. It follows it. And make no mistake, the world will try to keep you focused on your conditions. It'll tell you, look at the numbers. Look at your age, look at your track record, look at what they said about you. But your future has nothing to do with what they said. It has everything to do with what you decide. The mind loves to make predictions based on the past. That's just how it's wired. It assumes that because something has always been a certain way, it will always be that way. But your mind isn't a prophet, it's a machine. It runs whatever program you install. And most people are running programs they didn't choose. They inherited them, they absorbed them. They accepted them without ever asking, is this belief serving me? So many people are waiting for their feelings to change before they act. But decisions don't come from feelings, they come from truth. You might not feel strong, but you can still decide to be. You might not feel confident, but you can still decide to show up. You might not feel ready, but you can still decide to begin. That's where the growth happens, not in waiting for the emotional weather to change, but in making a decision that stands no matter how you feel. When you understand that your decision has more weight than your environment, everything begins to shift. And that shift isn't loud. It doesn't come with fanfare or recognition. It happens in the quiet moments when you say to yourself, enough. Enough of playing small. Enough of waiting for things to improve. Enough of identifying with what hurt me instead of who I'm becoming. That quiet decision is where your authority starts to rise, because when you decide, truly decide, you give up all other options. You cut off escape routes. You eliminate the backup plans. You stop playing both sides. You lock in. And when you lock in, life meets you at that level of clarity. The reason so many people stay stuck is not because they don't want to change. It's because they haven't decided to. They're entertaining it. considering it, talking about it. But a true decision doesn't leave room for debate. You don't negotiate with your limitations once you decide to be free from them. You don't argue with your excuses once you've decided to rise. You move, you act, you align. Now, that doesn't mean circumstances won't push back. They will. The moment you decide to grow, life will test you. Not to defeat you, but to reveal what's real. Decisions require reinforcement. They demand repetition. You don't make the decision once. You make it again and again every time your environment tries to pull you back into the old version of yourself. Every time someone doubts you. Every time fear whispers. Every time the old mindset tries to sneak back in, you reinforce your decision by staying true to it. And here's the truth. You will have every reason to turn back. Life will give you the perfect excuse, a delay, a betrayal, a failure, a breakdown, and in that moment, your past self will beg for comfort. It will say, see, this is why you don't try. This is why you play it safe. If you haven't truly decided, you'll listen. But if the decision is real, rooted in vision, not emotion, you'll keep going. You got to stop identifying with the version of you that was built in survival. The version of you that made decisions out of fear, out of pain, out of desperation. That version served a purpose. It got you through, but it's not the version that will take you to the next level. That next version requires a new identity, and identity is shaped by decisions, not circumstances. The people who break through, who rise above, who rebuild, who create a new reality, they all have one thing in common. They stopped waiting to feel ready and made the decision to be ready. They stopped asking for permission. They stopped collecting reasons. They made a non-negotiable decision to become something greater, and they backed that decision with action, discipline, and belief. Belief that was built over time, not handed to them at the start. Where you are now is not your final destination. It is a temporary reflection of old choices, old beliefs, old thinking. But one powerful decision, one absolute, unwavering internal yes, can disrupt that entire pattern. Not because the world changes immediately, but because you do. And once you change, the world has no choice but to respond. That's how it works. Most people wait for their feelings to cooperate before they act. They wait to feel motivated, wait to feel inspired, wait to feel confident, wait to feel ready. But the problem with that approach is simple. Feelings are unreliable. They shift like the wind. They react to the environment, the mood, the weather, the comments someone made, the number in the bank account. If you build your life based on how you feel in the moment, you'll never build anything that lasts. You'll be starting and stopping for the rest of your life. You'll move when it's easy, retreat when it's not, and wonder why nothing ever changes. That's why discipline is essential. Discipline is not punishment. It's not force. It's not pushing through life like a robot with no emotion. It's structure. It's alignment. It's the part of you that honors the decision you made long after the mood you made it in has faded, because it will fade. You can make a powerful decision at midnight. You can journal your goals with fire in your chest. But when the alarm clock rings the next morning, when life punches back, when the old feelings creep in, the emotion won't be there to carry. That's when discipline steps in. Discipline is doing what needs to be done whether you feel like it or not. Not because you're cold or detached, but because you know your future doesn't respond to emotion, it responds to consistent, intentional action. And that consistency is what builds trust with yourself. You don't develop confidence by reciting affirmations while doing nothing. You develop confidence by watching yourself show up again and again, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one's watching, even when your feelings are pulling you in the opposite direction. There's this illusion people have that growth is supposed to feel good. That if you're doing what you're meant to do, you'll feel in flow all the time. But flow is not a constant state. It's a reward. You enter flow after showing up, after staying focused, after breaking through the initial resistance. That resistance is real. It's the mind trying to keep you where you are. It doesn't care if you're happy. It just wants you to stay familiar. That's its job. Keep you safe, keep you predictable, keep you the same. But you weren't designed to stay the same. You were built for evolution. And every stage of evolution requires the courage to go beyond comfort. Discipline becomes your compass in that process. When you can't trust your feelings because they're influenced by fear, doubt, laziness, you lean on your discipline. You don't ask, do I feel like doing this? You ask, is this aligned with who I decided to become? That shift in thinking, that switch from emotion-driven action to purpose-driven behavior is what separates those who rise from those who stay stuck. People confuse motivation with commitment. Motivation comes and goes. It's nice when it's there, but it's not dependable. Commitment is deeper. It's internal. It's when you've made a vow to your future and you show up for it, even when you don't see results, even when progress is invisible, even when the world isn't clapping. It's discipline in motion. And ironically, when you show up without needing to feel great, you actually start to feel better. Because there's something deeply fulfilling about knowing you're being true to your path, even when it's hard. And this doesn't mean you're rigid. Discipline isn't the absence of emotion. It's the maturity to feel fully and still act wisely. You can feel tired and still move forward. You can feel scared and still speak up. You can feel unworthy and still show up to your work. That's where your power lives, in the space between feeling and act. The ability to pause, acknowledge your emotion, and then still do what you said you'd do, that's self-leadership. Look at anyone who's built something meaningful, whether it's a business, a relationship, a legacy, and behind the scenes, you'll see discipline. You'll see mornings where they didn't want to show up, but they did. You'll see nights when they were exhausted, but they kept going, not because they were superhuman, but because they had trained their mind to be loyal to the vision, not the feeling. That training isn't glamorous, it's not loud, it's not Instagram worthy, but it's powerful and it's repeatable. You build discipline the same way you build muscle, through reps. Small decisions made daily that reinforce your identity. When you wake up early because you said you would, when you finish the task you wanted to avoid. When you follow through on the workout, the call to conversation, each act is a vote for the person you're becoming. And the more votes you cast, the harder it becomes to break the pattern. That's momentum. That's where things start to shift in your favor. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The truth is, the gap between who you are and who you want to be is filled with hard, often boring, unglamorous work. And the only thing strong enough to carry you through that gap is discipline. It's the bridge. It's the backbone. It's the inner voice that says, we're not negotiating today. We're doing what needs to be done. And every time you listen to that voice, instead of the one whispering excuses, you get stronger, not just mentally, energetically. You begin to carry a different frequency. You walk differently. You speak differently. You become someone who can be trusted, not just by others, but by yourself. And self-trust is everything. If you don't trust yourself to follow through, you'll second guess every opportunity. You'll sabotage your wins. You'll stay in situations that are beneath you because you don't believe you can handle what's beyond them. Discipline repairs that. It reminds you that you're capable. It proves to you day by day that you don't need to feel like doing something to still do it. And eventually it becomes who you are. Not something you try to have, not something you borrow from others, but something you embody. Naturally, consistently, powerfully. The more you practice discipline, the less you rely on willpower. Willpower is limited. It burns out. Discipline becomes automatic. It becomes identity. And once it becomes your identity, everything changes. Because you're no longer negotiating with yourself. You're not begging for the strength to begin. You're simply living as the person who does what needs to be done, regardless of how it feels in the moment. Life will teach you something very quickly if you pay attention. No one is coming to save you. People might care, they might empathize, they might even lend a hand for a moment, but at the end of the day, the responsibility is still yours. And the sooner you embrace that truth, the freer you become. See, we live in a world where we confuse support with salvation. We think someone is going to come along and lift the entire weight off our shoulders, but that's not how real growth works. You're not meant to be rescued, you're meant to ride. There's a difference between being understood and being carried. Yes, there are people who will love you. People who will say, I get it when you're in pain. People who genuinely want the best for you. And that's beautiful, but it's not the answer. Because even if they understand your pain, they can't live your purpose. They can't make your decisions. They can't fight your battles. They can't discipline your thoughts or silence your fears or wake up for you every day and do the work that needs to be done. That's on you. And if you're waiting for someone to care enough to change your life for you, you'll be waiting forever. No one cares about your vision the way you do. No one hears your inner voice. No one sees the dream you have at 2 a.m. when the world is asleep. That vision was given to you for a reason. And with it came the responsibility to bring it to life. That responsibility cannot be outsourced. It cannot be handed off. It must be owned fully and completely. Now, that doesn't mean you go it alone. in bitterness or isolation. It doesn't mean you close yourself off and try to carry the entire load without ever asking for help. There's strength in community, in mentorship, and connection. But even in the strongest network, your part is your part. Others can pour into you, but if your cup has a hole in the bottom, you'll stay empty. You've got to do the internal patchwork. You've got to decide that your life is your job. Too many people hand over their power without even realizing it. They blame their parents, their ex, their boss, the system, the timing, the economy. And while those things may have played a role in your story, they are not your conclusion. The moment you keep pointing to someone or something else as the reason you're not where you want to be, you're giving away your authority. And authority over your life is not something that you can afford to lose. Responsibility doesn't mean guilt. It doesn't mean shame. It doesn't mean everything that happened was your fault. It means that from this point forward, you decide how to respond. You decide how to think. You decide how to move. You decide who you become, despite it all. That's the turning point. When you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what am I going to do with it? People will understand your pain, yes, but even they can't transform it, because transformation is an inside job. It starts when you realize that while others can sympathize, they cannot save. They can encourage, but they cannot endure for you. They can inspire, but they cannot execute for you. Execution belongs to you. And no matter how much someone loves you, they cannot make you do the work. That's where many people get stuck. They confuse being heard with being helped. But being heard is a comfort. Being helped is a choice you make when you act on that understanding. It's not about becoming cold or hard-hearted. It's about becoming strong. There's a quiet power in someone who no longer needs permission to evolve. Someone who doesn't wait to be cheered on before they move. Someone who has learned to become their own source of accountability. Because once you develop that level of responsibility, you stop collapsing under your emotions. You stop being reactive. You start becoming intentional. No one is going to live your life for you. And the longer you wait for someone to fix what's broken inside, the deeper the cracks will get. You don't heal by waiting. You heal by facing, by deciding, even in the presence of pain, to take one step, then another. And another, and another, until what once held you down becomes the very ground you rise from. It's a powerful thing when you stop needing people to validate your struggle, because now you're not chasing sympathy. You're building strength. You're not rehearsing your wounds. You're rewriting your future. It takes courage to let go of the story that says, I need someone else to pull me through. But once you do, you realize something extraordinary. You were built to pull yourself through. You start showing up differently when you take full responsibility. You stop making decisions based on what other people think or expect. You begin to honor your own path. You stop waiting for the right time or the perfect conditions, because you understand that waiting is just fear in disguise. You move because you're called to. You show up because you've decided to. And you trust that in the process of doing so, you will become the person who can carry the outcome you're chasing. Responsibility gives you your power back. Every time you take it, even in small ways, getting up when you don't want to, making the call you've been avoiding, confronting the pattern you keep repeating, you become stronger, not just emotionally, but spiritually. You start to radiate something different, a calm intensity, a quiet knowing, a sense that no matter what happens, you'll figure it out. And that's not arrogance, that's ownership. The truth is, everyone has their own mountain to climb. And while people may walk beside you for a while, no one can take your steps for you. Your journey is yours, your lessons are yours, and your strength will be yours. Not borrowed, not inherited, but earned. The more you rely on that truth, the less you need external validation to feel worthy. Because now you've made a decision. I am responsible for my life. There's a moment in everyone's journey where silence shows up. Not the peaceful kind, not the calm after a storm, but the silence that feels like a void, like the world stopped clapping, like the support dried up, like no one's watching anymore. That silence is heavy, it's uncomfortable. It feels like you've been abandoned in your efforts, like you're the only one still trying. You look around and wonder, where is everybody? Where are the people who said they believed in me? That silence, though it feels like punishment, is actually a test. It's where life checks if you meant what you said when no one else is around to echo it back to you. You learn quickly that not everyone will celebrate your growth. Not everyone will understand your discipline. Not everyone will clap when you change. Some people liked you better when you were playing small because it made them comfortable. Some people will disappear the moment you stop validating their version of you. That's not a loss, it's alignment. When you start doing the deep internal work, when you begin to discipline yourself, to hold yourself to a higher standard, to break toxic patterns, you will trigger the parts of others that aren't ready to do the same. They won't always say it, but they'll pull away. Some slowly, some suddenly. And if you're not rooted in purpose, you'll mistake that withdrawal as a sign that you're on the wrong path. But it's the opposite. The shedding is part of the process. Growth demands solitude, not isolation, but solitude. There is a difference. Isolation is closing yourself off out of fear. Solitude is standing in your own power out of choice. And in that space, where it's just you and your thoughts, you're faced with the raw truth of who you are. You can't hide behind distractions. You can't lean on applause. You can't get high off of external validation. All you got is your vision, your belief, and your commitment. That's where resilience is forged. See, in the beginning, people cheer because they're curious. They're watching. They're inspired by your energy. But once the novelty fades, once your change becomes real, once it starts challenging their comfort zones, that's when the noise dies down. You'll have people who rooted for you when it was convenient, but go quiet when it's consistent. Because consistency forces people to confront their own inconsistencies. Your discipline becomes a mirror, and not everyone wants to look in that mirror. The absence of applause doesn't mean the work is meaningless. It means the work is now yours alone to carry. And if you rely on claps to validate your movement, you'll stall every time they stop. That's why you must detach from the need to be seen. Do the work in the dark. Build in silence. Become undeniable, not because you shouted your worth, but because you embodied it without needing confirmation. That's a different kind of strength. The kind that doesn't waver just because the room is quiet. And here's something most won't tell you. Loneliness is part of the climb. Not forever, but for a season. The higher you go in your personal growth, the more intentional your circle has to become. You can't take everyone with you. Not because you're better, but because not everyone is willing to grow. And that's okay, but you can't slow your steps just to be accepted by people who are content where they are. You can love people and still outgrow them. You can respect the past and still walk away from it, because your future deserves space. And if you keep filling that space with people who only support your comfort, you'll never rise into your calling. You've got to learn how to clap for yourself. That might sound cliche, but it's one of the most powerful habits you'll ever build. Celebrate the small wins, even when no one else notices. Honor the effort even when the results are still forming. Validate your own discipline, not with arrogance, but with quiet recognition that you're showing up for something that matters to you. That self-validation becomes your fuel. It builds internal momentum. You stop chasing encouragement and start generating it. The truth is, the world doesn't owe you recognition. And the sooner you stop needing it, the freer you become. You start moving with a different kind of energy. One that's not controlled by who's watching, who's praising, or who's even present. You become grounded in the mission, not the moment. That's where mastery lives, in the quiet repetition, in the unseen effort, in the unglamorous grind. There's beauty in the silence if you learn how to listen. It teaches you patience. It teaches you trust. It sharpens your intuition. It clears out the noise of expectation and lets you hear your own voice again. And when that voice says, keep going, you don't question it. You don't look around for agreement. You simply keep going, because now you're not walking for the crowd. You're walking for your character. Silence also teaches you gratitude. Because when the results finally come, when the door opens, when the breakthrough happens, you know it wasn't handed to you, you earned it. Not through hype, not through popularity, but through persistence, through quiet, consistent, lonely work. And that builds a kind of confidence that can't be shaken, because you didn't just build a result, you built a foundation. So many people start with excitement, but quit in the silence. They mistake stillness for stagnation. But that's the secret. Real growth happens in the quiet. Roots don't grow when the wind is loud. They grow when it's still. That's when the depth forms. That's when you become anchored. And once you anchored, it doesn't matter who shows up or who walks away. You know who you are. You know where you're going, and you train yourself to move, not because the world gave you permission, but because your purpose gave you direction. Pain is the part of the process that most people try to avoid, yet it's the very thing that holds the seeds of transformation. It's uncomfortable, inconvenient, and it rarely shows up on your schedule, but it's not your enemy. The real danger isn't in the pain itself, it's in how we respond to it. Most people treat pain like a stop sign. They feel it, and immediately they begin to retreat. They pull back, question everything, start to unravel. But pain isn't always a signal to stop. Sometimes it's an invitation to look deeper, to go further, to uncover the layers you've been ignoring. And when you learn how to feel pain without letting it control your next move, you begin to access a level of strength that most never tap into. Pain is a powerful teacher. Not because it's dramatic, but because it forces you to get